meetings for many, many hours. I got the questions. I responded. We wrote them out. I read them once. I read them a second time. We made some changes. That's it.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts. A brand new week there. John, how you doing from the North Lawn? Good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. It is a brand new week, a bit of a short one. The president heads off to Mar-a-Lago tomorrow, and a couple of people around here at the White House who normally don't take any time off are actually off for the week. So it's definitely Thanksgiving. The president talking about potential changes to his cabinet, giving a little bit more detail to our Chris Wallace in an interview on Friday that aired yesterday. One of the changes that is said to be being considered is switching out DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. The president saying that he's thinking about it, but also indicating he has not yet made a decision. Listen here.
I like her a lot. I respect her a lot. She's very smart. I want her to get much tougher, and we'll see what happens there, but I want to be extremely tough.
Kirstjen Nielsen is well liked around the White House as well. People lauding the work that she did to maintain election integrity in the face of a lot of cyber threats. Supporters of Nielsen say that she has been tough on border enforcement, doing everything she can within the boundaries of U.S. law. But the president not happy with the number of people who continue to be apprehended at the border. He believes not enough is being done to either keep people out or dissuade them from coming to the United States in the first place. The job of chief of staff also being talked about. In the summer, John Kelly, you'll remember, said the president asked him to stay on through 2020, and he may, but he also may not. Listen to the president here.
I wouldn't look. We get along well. There are certain things I love what he does, and there are certain things that I don't like that he does that aren't his strength. It's not that he doesn't do, he works so hard. He's doing an excellent job in many ways. There are a couple of things where it's just not his strength.
Not his fault. It's just not his strength. There is a group of people who are close to the president who have been trying to get rid of Kelly for months upon months now. But there's another group of people outside the White House, Bill, who fear what might happen if Kelly were to ever leave.
Well, it's interesting. What can we expect on these written answers? Or perhaps when should we expect that with the special counsel?
Well, I can tell you it's not going to be today. As to whether it would be tomorrow or even before Thanksgiving, not clear at this point. Again, a lot of people are gone from the White House, and the president himself is leaving. But there's a chance, while it won't be today, I'm told, that it could be before Thanksgiving. The president also suggesting that if the interim attorney general, Matt Whitaker, were to do something to rein in the Mueller investigation, that would be Whitaker's decision to do. Listen to what the president said.
Look, it's going to be up to him. I think he's very well aware politically. I think he's astute politically. He's a very smart person.
You won't overrule him if he decides to curtail.
I would not get involved. And all these people that say, I'm going to end the investigation, they've been saying that now for how long has this witch hunt gone on?
And while the president seemed to indicate in his interview there with Chris Wallace that he would not sit down for an interview, I'm told that the possibility of a follow-up interview in person is still out there, though highly unlikely at this point. Bill?
Thank you, John. John Roberts from the White House, back with you a bit later today. Thank you, Sarah. Julie.
It is official. Florida will have a new governor and a new senator come January after Democrat Andrew Gillum conceded to Republican Ron DeSantis over the weekend, and Senator Bill Nelson conceded to Rick Scott nearly 2 weeks after Election Day and a drawn-out recount. Senator-elect Scott already has his sights set on Capitol Hill.
It's going to be exciting to go to Washington. I'm a business guy. I'm going to bring a outsider perspective like I did to Tallahassee and do everything I can to make sure federal government starts working for you and me.
Peter Ducey joins us live in Tallahassee, Florida, with all the developments following the recount. Hey, Peter, what are you going to do now?
Well, Julie, now we're watching what's happening down in Broward County because the election supervisor, Brenda Snipes, who said that she was pleased with her office's machine recount, even though it didn't count since the results were submitted late. She just quit, and she wrote a letter to Governor Scott that says this in part: although I have enjoyed this work tremendously over these many election cycles, both large and small, I'm ready to pass the torch. Therefore, I request that you accept my letter of resignation effective January 4th, 2019. Brenda Snipes spent most of this weekend trying to explain what happened to more than 2,000 ballots that went missing, and she kept getting defensive, insisting that they were inside the building, misfiled somewhere. But For Senator-elect Scott, it was not the missing ballots that were alarming. He says it was the ones that nobody knew about until after Election Day.
It was very frustrating. When I announced we'd won that Tuesday night, we were up 57,000 votes, and they just kept finding ballots. And so that's why, I'm thankful for a lot of people that brought light to this to make sure we stop this. And we're got to do everything we can to make sure these elections are free and fair.
Around lunchtime yesterday, Scott got what he describes as a gracious concession call from Senator Bill Nelson. And shortly after, the three-term incumbent who has been laying low posted this.
Well, things worked out a little differently than Grace and I had hoped, but let me say I by no measure feel defeated. And that's because I've had the privilege of serving the people of Florida and our country for most of my life.
So tomorrow morning here at the state capitol in Tallahassee, the Secretary of State will finally certify the results of all the elections, which means that this campaign that lasted an extra 2 weeks will finally officially be over. Julie.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter Doocy.
For more on this, Mark Thiessen, now Fox News contributor, fellow American Enterprise Institute, also the Washington Post. Mark, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Bill.
Kellyanne Conway 2 hours ago talked about Bill Nelson's history in Florida the following way. Watch.
The last time Senator Nelson ran for Senate 6 years ago, he won by 1.1 million votes, a 1 million vote plus margin. This time he lost. The people of Florida clearly don't want him to be the senator. He's been unremarkable. He should be credited for his service. But in the last few years, he's been sort of unremarkable.
So Rick Scott gets the victory there at a time where the Hill has this headline: Dem gains put Sunbelt in play for 2020. So what is it Republican gains in Florida? Is it Republican losses in Arizona and Nevada? How do you size this up, Mark?
Well, I mean, the death of the Republican Party in the Sun Belt is slightly premature. I mean, the Republicans just won both the governorship and the Senate in Florida. They won the governorship in Georgia, despite losing Arizona Senate race in a very close race. Governor Ducey won overwhelmingly. So they won the Senate in Tennessee. They won the Senate in Texas. You can go on and on. So I think that the Republican Party is fine in the Sun Belt. What's happened in the election, however, that is changing and is sort of maybe fundamental, is that suburban districts that traditionally voted Republican and that voted for Mitt Romney by double digits in the 2012 election voted overwhelmingly Democrat this time around, while the Obama-Trump voters in the Midwest, working class voters, came out in droves for the Republicans this time around. So the Trump voters, they responded. They came out for when President Trump called them out. So what we're seeing is a shift in the electorate where the country club Republicans have started voting Democrat in the Trump era, and Obama voters in the Midwest, working class voters, have started voting Republican. The question is this a fundamental shift, or is this a Trump-driven phenomenon, and we just don't know the answer yet?
Okay, so you're talking about the Romney/McCain/Bush Republicans versus what's shaping up now, if you can still hear me, Mark.
Sure.
How then do you win?
Yes.
How do you win back those spots that are perceived to be weak now?
Well, that's the fundamental question is does the Republican Party simply turn around and say, okay, we're losing these suburban districts. Are we going to spend a lot of time trying to win them back? Or do we try and consolidate our gains with the Republican Party, try to consolidate its gains with the working class Democrats? That has fundamental policy implications because these Obama Trump Democrats, working class Democrats, they're not for entitlement reform. They're not for small government. They're not for free trade. So a lot of traditional Republican policy positions would go out the window if you did that. I think that the Republican Party can walk and chew gum at the same time. Trump can consolidate these voters who have come into the Republican fold, but he can do a better job of winning back these suburban voters because, quite frankly, they should be voting Republican. President, we talked about this in the morning before Election Day. The economy is booming. Women's unemployment is the lowest it's been in 65 years, but yet suburban women have fled to the Democratic Party. There's no reason for that. Donald Trump, a president as successful as Donald Trump in the economy, should not be hemorrhaging suburban women. He's got to do a better job of trying to bring those people back into the fold.
Interesting stuff. Just got a couple seconds here. What do you expect on the Mueller answers? What do you expect on cabinet changes? Care to go on the record with any predictions, Mark?
I think there's a lot of hyperventilating about all the changes. It is absolutely normal for the President of the United States after an election to try and reshuffle his cabinet, move some people in, move some people out. There's no evidence whatsoever that he's going to interfere with the Mueller probe in any way, shape, or form. If he did, there's a check on it. It's called impeachment. The Democrats now control the House. They can impeach him if he tries to interfere with the Mueller probe. And, so I think everybody's getting a little bit worked up over nothing. The President is going to make some changes in his cabinet, and that's the same. George W. Bush, after the midterm elections in 2006, replaced Rumsfeld with Bob Gates, and that was seen as normal. So I don't see why everybody's so worked up about some cabinet changes.
Good to get your analysis there.
Take care.
You so much, Mark Thiessen. We'll talk real soon.
Fox News alert on the deadliest wildfire in California's history, and the president got a first-hand look at the devastation there on the ground. Not wet weather moving in. Yeah, that wet weather is actually moving in, bringing a whole new set of problems. We're going to be live with the story coming up.
Also, I am told to tell you, Julie, that the giant dance floor piano has returned as well.
Oh, thank God.
Here we go.
Have you ever tapped on that thing before?
Maybe. Maybe 'tis the season.
Yeah. It is very fun, even for adults. You should try it sometime.
Okay.
It's literally
You
around
have
the
done
corner
it?
now. I have.
I see.
I'll admit, as an adult, I did not do it. I did it with children, but what the heck? I'll take you. It's right around the corner.
I'll go with you.
All right. The U.S. preparing for a long-term stay in Syria after defeating ISIS, with a plan for the troops to remain there until the country is stabilized. Now, the U.S. is also requiring Iranian-commanded forces must leave Syria before its withdrawal.
You cannot have an enduring defeat of ISIS until you have fundamental change in the Syrian regime and fundamental change in Iran's role in Syria, which contributed greatly to the rise of ISIS in the first place in 2013, 2014.
Joining us now, retired four-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, always great to see you.
Good to see you, Jill.
So the United States is laying some pretty strict groundwork to stay in Syria.
The remnants of ISIS, and also, as you mentioned, stabilization. We're trying to ensure by helping the people in the area, particularly the war-torn area of eastern Syria, to reconstruct, to build schools, to get electricity and water going again, that ISIS does not return. So that major objective is ongoing. But what is new is what you and Bill have mentioned, is that we have a new strategic objective, which is essentially to contain Iran and stay in the country and have geopolitical influence on the Assad regime, on Russia, and on the Iranians to eventually get a political settlement that involves Iran leaving the country forever. That is a new strategic goal that the United States has.
The U.S. State Department has yet to spell out a clear policy, and the Pentagon doesn't seem to know if removing Iran and Iranian proxies was actually going to happen. What is the official stance on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because here's some of the issues. I've spoken to Ambassador Jeffries, by the way, who you had here, and he's President Trump's envoy to Syria, and he's very capable, preeminent Middle Eastern expert. And here's the challenge we have. We have a strategic geopolitical objective to contain Iran and force them to leave. We do not, and I say again, we do not have a military objective to fight Iranian proxies in Syria. That would require a legal authority that we do not have. We are operating in Syria based on 9/11 legal authority coming out of the horrific attack on the United States to be able to chase down radical Islamists. We don't have legal authority to conduct military operations against Iranians or Iranian proxies. So that is why we have a geopolitical objective, but not a military one. And that's also why the Pentagon, if somebody's poking at them and they're giving you an answer that may not have all the clarity that you're used to getting, that's the reason behind it.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I want to move on to another topic in the interview between Chris Wallace and the president. Chris Wallace brought up the backlash that the president received on Veterans Day. The president said, looking back on Arlington Cemetery and that situation, that he should have just gone. I want to play that part of the interview.
Here's the question. You're back in Washington on Monday, Veterans Day. Why don't you go across the river to Arlington for that ceremony? Barack Obama went every year he was here in D.C.?
I should have done that. I was extremely busy on calls for the country. We did a lot of calling, as you know.
But this is Veterans Day.
I probably, in retrospect, I should have. And I did last year, and I will virtually every year.
How do you think the military by him not being there, given the president's explanation that he had been busy taking care of state matters?
I don't think the military or our vets are offended by the president not being there. And the reason is because he's clearly stands out as a president who is so supportive of the military. He's rebuilding the military, obviously, with 2 down payments in terms of budgets, and the support he has shown for the vets. We've never, ever had a president post-World War II has been as supportive to do things to help our veterans as this president has. So I think he's got a lot of money in the bank when it comes to something like this. And look, he made a mistake, and he admits it. He should have been there. That's the reality of it. I think he was influenced when he left Europe. The last thing he did in Europe, he was in the pouring rain making a speech at an American cemetery. And I think that probably influenced him to say, well, I probably don't have to go to Arlington. I'm not going to get there until the morning anyway. And I've got some other things I'm going to do. That was a mistake. He owns up to it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up as well, that he was paying tribute to all Americans lost fighting for our country as he did that on that rainy day in France. But thank you very much, General Jacquin. Always great to see you.
Yeah, good talking to you, Julie.
Thank you, sir. A man who once pleaded for his family's return before he was charged with murdering them heads back to court today to face sentencing after a surprising guilty plea.
Plus this, thousands of migrants reach a U.S. border town as residents protest their arrival. We've got a live report for you.
I am protesting that we want the government to take control. We want them to stop them at the border and register them, check who they are, and then let them in once they register them.
I'd like to take a moment to address my fellow veterans, because I know so many of you have served our country honorably. One of the benefits that we as a country give you as a veteran is the eligibility for a VA loan for up to 100% of your home.
Testing the arrival of migrants from Central America. Thousands pouring into the town over the weekend, overflowing shelters. They're expected to stay for months, possibly seeking asylum here in the U.S. William Lajeunesse is back on that story. How goes it today, William? Good morning.
Well, Bill, what you see here is the United States sending a message to Mexico City. Unless you solve your problem on your southern border, you're going to have a problem with your northern neighbor. So what you see here is the United States is narrowing the amount of territory it has to defend in case, indeed, the migrant caravan tries to come to the border, have a sit-in, or literally run the border here at the port of entry in San Ysidro, where the Mexicans have already helped out. They've shut down 4 lanes of traffic here. So they brought in these barriers in case the people come up. Then they got these ones here they can bring in very quickly, mobilize, and literally move them right over here. What the United States did today, they've never done before, here, shut down the border for 5 hours. So they can bring in more K-rails, or these concrete barriers, and concertina wire. I want to show you some video that we shot yesterday of how irate people here in Tijuana already are with the caravan. There were maybe 1,000 very passionate people throwing water bottles, beer cans at riot police, saying, "Viva Mexico, Hondurans go home, we don't want you here. Immigration yes, invasion no." The police barricade held, but just barely. It bent but did not break as they stopped a confrontation near the migrant shelter.
You see people, within the migrant caravan smoking weed, drinking, throwing rocks at the cops, causing chaos.
Some of these people that are coming into with these caravans are committing crimes, and so we are protesting. I am protesting that we want the government to take control.
Now, their point of view is basically this. They feel that these migrants entered illegally, even violently, at the Guatemala border. They feel they lack documentation, that they're going to bring crime, and that they're ungrateful. One social media post from a migrant saying she didn't like the beans and rice went viral. They said, "If you don't like our food, go home." Now, there are defenders here as well, saying Tijuana has a responsibility to welcome and protect the migrants.
It feels like they invaded, and that was not the correct way, but I know all of them are not like that.
We are here for work, to have a better life, and no trouble, not troublemakers.
So there are 6,000 migrants here right now. That shelter has become somewhat of a refugee camp. Many want them gone. There's a job fair today for jobs here in the maquiladoras, about 3,000 and elsewhere around the country. Bill?
Thank you, William. William Lajeunesse, more to come on that story, certainly. Thank you, sir. Julie?
They proudly served our country. Now they're looking to make a change in Congress, with the midterms boosting the number of veterans on Capitol Hill. We're going to be talking to newly elected Florida Congressman Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz about what veterans bring to the table when it comes to policy.
Looking forward to talking to him. Also in a moment here, a grim task in California. Crews searching through charred wreckage for human remains. That state's deadliest wildfire continues. We'll get a live report from the ground coming up shortly here.
Fire grew so quickly in the brush that is around this area, it also grew into the trees. And when it goes into the trees, it creates a shower of embers as well.
From the first loving touch, everything that touches your baby should be this comforting.
Men and women that are fighting this fire are incredible.
Jonathan Hunt is live in Malibu with the very latest there. Hi, Jonathan.
Good morning, Julie. It is really a race against time up in Northern California. The rescuers searching for the bodies of the missing, and remember, there remain nearly 1,000 still unaccounted for at this point, are trying to complete their task before expected rains arrive over the next 24 to 36 hours. Because obviously, when everything has been burned down to just tiny particles of ash, that could all be washed away in those rains, and it might mean therefore that they never get to find the bodies of all of those who died. There was also a vigil near Paradise, California, the town that was pretty much wiped out by the campfire last night. A lot of people showing up and sharing the stories of what they believe are the miracles that led them to safety. Listen here.
We were basically a moving bomb because we had a bunch of propane tanks in the back of our truck and in our trailer. Just to think we could have exploded and so many people could have died.
Getting out was absolute mayhem. It was like a war zone.
Here in Southern California, in Malibu, where we are now, a lot of residents are finally being allowed home. But this is the kind of thing, Julie, that a lot of them are coming back to when they get here. The realization, the stark realization that there is essentially nothing left to come home to, Julie. It is going to be a very, very tough Thanksgiving week for the victims of both the Camp Fire up north and the Woolsey fire down here in Southern California. Julie?
All right, Jonathan Hunt, thank you.
From the front lines of Capitol Hill now, this midterm saw a number of military veterans elected to Congress. The Hill reporting this, quote, 16 former service members, including 3 women, won their races and will serve their first term starting in January, the most new veterans since 2010. What an honor. Congressman-elect Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, who won Ron DeSantis' Florida House seat. That's Congressional District 6 around Daytona Beach. Sir, congratulations and welcome back here to America's Newsroom.
I appreciate it.
How do you remark on the gains that these veterans are making out of Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, you know, Bill, we are at a record low in terms of veterans in the House and in the Senate. We're at a record low in our nation's history, hovering around 17%. So I am thrilled to see more veterans running on both sides of the aisle. Why is that so important? Because veterans know how to get things done. From the earliest age, we put our life on the line for our country, and we are about mission, we're about country, we're about getting results. And I think you're going to see, you know, setting the specific policy issues aside, our ethos that we bring to office will change. You know, in the foxhole, on the ship, on the plane, nobody cares about race, religion, socioeconomic background. It's about accomplishing the mission for your country, and I think that's what you're going to see with more veterans
you wonder how
on the Hill going forward.
Washington can beat down good people, right? I mean, there's a long track record for that, right, Michael?
Well, I used to tell people out of the campaign trail all the time, the bar for a bad day for me is getting shot at or blown up. So look, I think what the other thing you're going to see with veterans is keeping things in perspective. You know, we resolve things in America through debate, and through voting, not through hatred and not through violence. That's what all kinds of countries around the rest of the world do, but not here. And I think you're going to see that perspective. You know, our enemies have names like Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden, not Nancy or Paul or Mitch. And I think that's the perspective that you're going to see. You don't see many extremists.
That strikes me as a different tone.
Well, absolutely. I mean, really, you know, I can list you half a dozen Democrats that I may disagree with on how to get from A to B, but I also know that we could sit down and have a beer at night and say, okay, this is a country that we fought for. This is our democracy that we were willing to die to defend. And how do we find common ground and how do we move the country forward? And I'm convinced that if you see that increase in that percentage from 17% back to where it was in the 70s and 80s, where it hovered around 70 to 80%, you're going to see a difference in our politics.
Dan Crenshaw is a Republican, colleague of yours from Houston, Texas, said
That's right.
something similar. Just give this a listen here.
We understand what leadership is, which is taking care of your people. Above all else, it's taking care of your people. It's inspiring people to be better. And also, it's an understanding that when we work with our fellow veterans, we know that we both started off this career just trying to serve our country before we got into politics. And that's a way to bridge that gap between us.
It sounds very similar to what you're saying, Michael.
That's right. You know, Dan's fantastic. Congressman-elect Crenshaw, I should say. We've done a number of events together. And so not only are we bridging the political divide,
FDA has required the manufacturers of the eSure permanent birth control implant to place its highest level of warning on this product. Over 16,000 women.
For optimism for our country going forward. We know how to get things done. We know how to move the ball. If you don't get results in business and in combat, bad things happen. And the more people with that perspective that we get on Capitol Hill, I think the better for America.
Wow, great stuff. Thank you, Michael. Good luck to you, okay? We'll see what's possible.
All right. Thanks so much, Bill.
You got a lot there. Thank you, Michael Waltz, Congressman-elect out of Florida today in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Julie. Thanks.
Okay, well, what was supposed to be a celebration of lights turns terrifying. Why a hot air balloon exploded right after taking off. Wow.
Also, deadly wildfires in California now posing a new threat. Rain in the forecast could trigger mudslides and air quality reaching dangerous levels over the weekend. We'll take you back live to the fire lines coming up shortly.
It was like, wow, at least from our house, we could only see one block. It was pretty, scary, really.
In these volatile markets, which investment are experts choosing for protection and profit? Stocks, real estate, bonds? None of the above. It's silver.